Well, boys and girls, it's been quite a long time since we had a class podcast on Mocast. Yes, and traditionally we have to start it off with one of the first that ever did it.
It was the second.
I think we did Frost
first, but I mean with the same guess. I mean, spoiler alert, obviously we're doing Unholy. We're going to talk about Unholy and how it changed over the course of the 9.2 beta and how it is now on live and what you can expect from the spec, because I know a lot of people might have the wrong impressions. And as always, the best guests you could ever have, we have Taez and Biceps, which you might know from obviously the Acherus Discord or our previous podcast, which we recommend you check if you want to know more about Unholy.
Or his YouTube channel, the Biceps also has YouTube.
Well, basically all the links are down in the description in our YouTube podcast if you're listening to this on Spotify. But glad to have you guys here back, man. How are you?
Are you good? Are you feeling good?
Yeah, hello, I'm good. How are you guys?
Perfect. It's perfect.
It's very, very clearly not really early in the morning for sure.
It is a bit early in the morning for everybody except Taez, but we're gonna make it work. Just jumping straight into Unholy Dead Night. I just opened up a couple of things here to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Now, 9.2 got some changes for me.
Yeah, that's the thing, because this is what I wanted to start with. Is so we all know that pretty much everybody and their mom has been ranking Unholy pretty low, and to my utmost sadness, I have done so as well, because I've looked at some of the numbers. However, a week or two ago, I think 2 weeks ago, Unholy got some buffs. So for all of you Unholy fans, rejoice. And guys, can you shed some light as to how is Unholy now? How we will expect it to perform, once with the double legendaries and all of that stuff unlocked?
Still very bad. The 4-piece got the set got buffed by 100%, and it's still very bad.
100%. Jesus.
So the set bonus was literally doubled, but the only thing that Unholy really shines at right now is in long execute phases. And even that's kind of questionable when Warrior exists. So Unholy's still bottom of the barrel, I'd say. I wish I could say it was better, but only place it has is an execute. Only hope it has really is if Mythic Jailer has some absurdly long execute phase, which I guess is totally possible. We haven't seen the fight yet. So, what do you think, Bicep?
So, I'm slightly biased here. So, I generally don't fancy going and saying that it's terrible, whatnot. So, it probably won't see play in the Race to World first. So, that's one way of looking at it. Because, we have Frosty K, who's got a very strong niche. You've seen it played on both Anduin and Lords of Dread, sorry. And it does really well there. Whereas Unholy is all about the single target, and it doesn't quite do it as well as other classes. To be fair, I think it's not fully represented in its best kind of way. So, if Unholy gets the Jailer weapon, and once we get double tier piece, and everyone gets the 4-piece, there is a lot of things going for it, and I'm quite excited next week when I'm hoping to obtain all of these things. You have lots of bosses where you can leverage the 4-piece both in the opener but also throughout the fight, which means that we will be able to funnel a ton of damage into the boss. And I play in my raid, I generally compare to how can I perform versus the raid, and I feel like currently Unholy is in a sufficiently good spot for at least me to compete for the top spot.
All right.
You're a little god amongst peasants, man. I've seen you play.
No. But yeah, it's not one of the best classes, but I wouldn't say it's one of the worst either. It's in the kind of middle ground, where it's kind of fine, but we can also expect it to be buffed next week, for instance. That wouldn't be too surprising.
Okay.
I'm going to counter that a little bit, Bicep. You're saying because of the mace, Unholy gets better, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know who also gets that mace? Warriors.
Well, yeah, the other classes also get, but I'm comparing, Unholy versus some ranged classes, whatever. Obviously,
Unholy versus Boomkins, they can use maces.
Yeah, but I don't know. The main reason you're putting Unholy up higher is because it gets the mace, which also benefits all of the other two-handed melee, like Warrior, which is Unholy's arguably biggest
Oh, yeah.
competitor.
But Taez
It's also, when you look at it from the point of view, which melee is competitive, it obviously becomes very competitive. So, there will always be that one class and it's very difficult to beat it, kind of thing. And, if you're not the best, you're the worst kind of mentality. It's all about perspective and what kind of goal you essentially have when you try to figure out which class to play. I play the class that I love, which is why I play Unholy. So, simple.
I mean,
Totally get that too.
when it comes to the majority of players, this is not even an issue. I would assume Unholy can perform decently for, I don't know, the rest of the player base. I mean, we're looking at the race world first because maybe this is one of the most difficult race world first. So you could probably say that people are going to min-max even more. So if there's like a half a percentage that they can squeeze out of a different spec that's not Unholy, you'll probably see Unholy even less. And that might lead people to believe that, oh my God, Unholy is just not viable in any way. Because if they don't see it, somebody that they consider as the top player play it, they might not see it as a viable spec, but it's clearly not the case. And I mean, we all know, if you've done the raid in any capacity, how good funnel damage can be on certain fights. And and you guys mentioned this maze. Okay, we obviously have dungeon journals, clearly, so we have seen the gavel that looks shit in my opinion, but it seems to be pretty strong, and everybody that can wield a two-hander wants it more than they want love from their mama. I'm just paraphrasing here. But what is this gavel that you guys are talking about?
How detailed do you want me to get before I get into
Oh my God, is that there's a whole conversation that can be had about it?
Yes. There's a lot going on with this mace.
All right.
For Unholy specifically, there's some cool stuff that can be done with it too. But I just want to know before I get waist deep into this.
Let's say somebody wants to play Unholy now and they say, man, I kind of want to really get that gavel. Should I aim it and what does it do for me? I don't know. Let's clarify. Then you can say that to me too, because I don't know.
Okay. Gavel of the First Arbiter. Mace drops off the Jailer. It's the strongest two-hand that Unholy's had access to in a long time. If you think like Getiku back in BFA was strong, this takes it to like a whole nother level, like several magnitudes more than that. It's incredibly strong, mostly due to the effects it gives. There's 5 different potential effects, 2 of which are an AoE effect, 2 of which are single target dots, and then 1 of which is a single target damage proc. They all have incredibly high proc rates though, so you're going to be popping them off like it's nobody's business. So even the like single target damage proc and AoE, it's still going to be hitting like everything pretty constantly. So really cool stuff there. When you use the mace, it spawns a little soul. You kill the soul and gives you 1 of the buffs randomly. So you're never going to really be able to predict or manipulate what buff you get. But what I do want to say is if you see that buff pop up and it's Boon of the End and you're in AoE, you're going to have a really good time. And that soul too makes things really cool for Unholy. You remember the 4 set, increases our pet's damage by 50% if Soul Reaper's secondary effect drops. Well, that little soul it summons, you got to kill it, right? Well, just hit it with the Soul Reaper. Guess what? You just got free 50% pet damage no matter what percent the boss is at.
Oh.
It only lasts 8 seconds. Yeah. It only lasts 8 seconds, but in your opener, that's pretty big. So yeah. Mace is really cool.
So,
what do you think about it, Bicep? Have you gotten it yet?
No, I didn't get it yesterday. Unfortunately, I would have been falling off my chair if I get anything. So in the opener, like your main damage window is quite short. Even if army lasts for 30 seconds, when everything overlaps, that isn't that long. And then 8-second buff will overlap most of that. So it's going to significantly improve your opener. And I think once you get Gavel, it's going to be difficult to justify using PI on someone else, for instance, because I think Unholy is going to burst so high.
Yep.
Given that, I actually think it's currently bugged. At least people told me that you can't proc Soul Reaper off it yet. But I believe that's unintended, so we're just going to have to report that and get it fixed.
Yes. Cut this part out, what I'm about to say next. So I already reported to Scar. He's already getting it fixed.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Cut will be implemented.
Yeah.
Cool. Sounds like a great addition for Unholy to be able to get this gavel. I was just under the impression that looking at the 9.2 changes, which I'm reading off of Biceps' guide on Wowhead, which will be in the description if you guys want to check it out. At first glance, when I saw this, when this shit was announced, it was kind of like sort of addressing what we kind of talked last time about Unholy. You know, the problem with a lot of the conduits. So something has been taken in, and I'm just gonna go through them a little bit because maybe some people don't know or whatever. So there's like 4 major conduits here that got let's say buffed. Convocation of the Dead reworked. Now has a base 1 second CDR and scaling festering wound damage component. Embrace Death damage buff by 14%. Eternal Hunger minion damage buff by 100%. And Brutal Grasp buff by 100%. Brutal Grasp is the one that affects the slappy hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. We never did talk about this, and I wanted to see your guys' point of view on this. Was this enough? Was this satisfying for you guys in terms of like what would they go for, or how would they fix it? Or do you guys feel they needed to do even more in terms of like the whole conduit issue for Unholy? Anybody can go.
I feel like it was spot on, really. It, our conduits didn't scale very well. This made them scale, fine. Convocation was great. The fact that we got extra CDR really didn't matter for us. So fixing that and adding a scaling component to something else, great. Brutal Grasp buff. I'm not quite sure why that got buffed so heavily because I thought it was kind of fine compared to the other ones, but now it's very juicy. That means our Abomination Limb just deals a ton of damage.
I think they did that to make it compete with Fae because of all the issues I brought up with Fae being goddamn strong. And they didn't want to buff a bomb's limb into the moon, so they just put some of it into the conduit.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we talked about previously, even though Unholy got these buffs, it's not performed that well. But that's mostly a factor of not scaling very well with the extra systems. So, as we said, the 4 set isn't that great. Double Legendary, is fine. But compared to other classes, it's not as powerful. So kind of Unholy baseline is really quite nice with these conduit buffs. But then the extra systems are not powerful enough to put it in a top spot, so to speak.
So that's where the main difference would come from. And I mean, this happened even after they've buffed the tier set for 100% and still not enough. So they were way off, I guess.
Yeah, imagine like the sorry state Unholy would be if those conduit changes had not happened, tier set had not been buffed. Unholy would be like doing less damage than tanks, and it's kind of crazy to think about, especially considering like I've been talking about these conduit issues for well over a year now. I pointed it out to them, been like, hey, this is what needs to happen, guys, and they finally did it. And then the next borrowed power system we get is just horribly undertuned too, and it's like, come on, guys, you're so close to greatness, just so close.
I wanted to circle back to what you mentioned very briefly, something that I was not personally aware of, the power of Night Fae. Can you explain that a little bit? I know that personally it's going to be really good for Blood Decay. I'm not sure why it would be better for Unholy, so if you guys can shed some light on it, if it's ever going to overtake Necrolords, that is.
Did you want to take this one, Bicep, or did you want me to do it because I did most of the legwork?
You can start off and then we can, go back and forth.
Yeah, no worries there. So, Night Fae, when we're heading into 9.2, before all of the conduit buffs and everything happened, Fae was looking like it was going to be the strongest option for Unholy, like all around period. That's mostly due to a combination of effects that we could have stacked once we got the double legendary. So those effects being Defile, Death Certainty, Rampant Transference, as well as what was the other one? Can't remember. But we're basically able to stack these effects together to where you can get 100% uptime on Death's Due, debuff. Oh, Withering Ground, the conduit. So we were able to stack all those effects. So you get an average of 14-second cooldown on Death's Due. So you get 100% uptime on that 20% strength buff that was given by Rampant Transference in 9.2. It ends up being just incredibly strong, even more so when you consider Withering Ground and Defile's damage multipliers are multiplicative with each other. So you end up doing like absurd amounts of damage with Defile in itself. Like it can break 1,000 DPS in single target, kind of absurd. So In multi-target,
It's very unusual, right? Because Death and Decay really is a non-factor in our damage usually, and now you stack so many effects on top of itself that it becomes a proper, you put this down and it deals a ton of damage.
And the cool thing is, it's entirely uncapped. It's not square root either. You drop that in AoE, it's going to deal absurd amounts of damage to everything. We're talking like 2,000 DPS per target while it's active.
Per target.
When you play this in dungeons and you look at your damage breakdown, it's going to be one of your top. You have like Epidemic, you have Clawing Shadows or Skirt Strike, and then you also have...
Oh my god, the BFA dream would have come reality again.
Yeah, well, that's still going to be a thing in Mythic Plus. People are probably going to be like, oh, but I like Necrolord, I like my slappy hands, but Night Fae with Rampant Transference, once we get that tomorrow, from time of recording anyway, we're getting that, and it's going to be absolutely insane. It also opens up another cool legendary for those Mythic Plus scenarios. Shambler. We're actually going to be using Shambler in Mythic Plus now, and it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
it's the return of the Infected Claws and Bursting Swords build.
Yep.
It really, builds itself into that build specifically. You get this Death and Decay windows, which are going to give you 20% strength, right? So the idea is to try and put all your DPS within these windows. And that's exactly what the Infected Claws and Bursting Swords build does. So that's why they kind of synergize very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the 20-second cooldown at a file, too, you're able to get those Bursting Swords windows so much more often. The sustained AoE damage that this new Unholy build is going to do is going to be really, really good. It's not going to be as good as Frost DK with their Forset, sadly. But it actually gives Unholy a nice little niche in Mythic Plus where it can do good AoE and it can do insane single target. So it might actually be a decent pick for Mythic Plus. My only concern is Frost's a thing.
Yeah. Frost's a thing, and DK generally doesn't have good Mythic Plus utility.
Yep.
So that's going to make it tricky to justify. But it's going to be fun to play.
Absolutely, yeah. It's going to be a blast at the very least.
You guys talked a bit about how to balance, and I mean, we've kind of discussed this topic in the last 2 episodes of Unholy about how the scaling is an issue and how Unholy takes in all the external powers as well. And you mentioned that the main reason why this would have been so good is because you ended up stacking a lot of multiplicative effects on top of Unholy. And it just reminded me that wasn't that kind of how BFA was as well? Because you stacked, not only were you stacking the effects of, the raw amount of bursting damage, you also had the strength from Fresher Might and so on and so forth. And it kind of makes me think, as someone who's just an average Unholy DK, isn't that how Unholy will ever going to be good? Is that a design flaw? Is that the only way that Unholy will ever be good, by having multiplicative effect stacking, which will always be in the danger of becoming incredibly broken? And we remember the damage it used to do in BFA and AoE, where it was like 5-10 times more than anybody else in the group, because of mostly the uncapped AoE. So what do you guys think? Is this how the spec is designed, and is this how the only way that it could always function because of all these multiplicative effects, or will it ever have some baseline floor of damage or performance that it can put out without having to worry about, okay, am I getting this 5% from there and this 5 from there and this 5 from there and so on and so forth?
I think short answer is no. There's no necessity to have any, scaling upon scaling upon scaling. I think people overestimate, these classes scale well, these classes don't scale well. It generally doesn't work like that. People say that Unholy doesn't scale well because it's got a mastery nerf. That's not entirely true. It's all about borrowed power systems. If you spin the lottery wheel and you get a good borrowed power, boom, your best class, right? It's not about some fundamental scaling with the classes or whatever. It's just, did you get an overpowered tier set? Voila, you are good. Yeah. That's how it works.
And if we look at, if we strip away all the borrowed power from all the classes in the game and we look at it, Unholy is actually like number 2. It is one of the best specs baseline, period. So it doesn't have issues with its baseline being too weak. It just has issues where they design these borrowed power systems and they just don't end up being very good for Unholy unless we can just stack them on top of each other. Just because each borrowed power we seem to get isn't very good on its own. So we have to figure out ways to where we can make this borrowed power good using other effects. It's kind of weird how they keep on doing that to Unholy specifically. Because, I mean, if we're looking back at BFA, yeah, that was a thing that happened. Even late BFA, we would stack the effects of like Magus of the Dead, Army of the Damned together to be able to, to have these big armies more often towards the end of the expansion. It was cool. But I wish they'd step away from that and put more power, or allow the borrowed power to just be good without having it stacked with other things.
I think this tier is a bit unprecedented due to the power of the tier sets. That they didn't used to be this powerful. If you look back, 2 piece plus 4 piece, 10-15%. Some classes gain, 30 higher. Look at Frost DK.
Yeah,
they gain so much, and I think that it's just a bit unusual.
It really is. I went back and looked at all the historical data for all the tier sets going back, and then the total tier set bonus average was 9.8%. And we have specs right now like Frost DK, which gains between its 2 and its 4 set just an absurd amount. It ends up being 26% over its bit damage before, and that's in single target. And AoE Frost ends up gaining 40%. It's kind of crazy.
I think Unholy against 15.
14.3.
Right.
Specific. We're gotta be specific here.
Super exact. 14.3%.
Well, I have the spreadsheet up next to me right now. I actually I have all the distributions of everything. Unholy with the 4-piece with all will serves are actually 14.6. And Unholy
compared to 2-piece.
2-piece is 4.8%.
Okay. Got it.
That's the buff it gets? That's what it gets from the 2-piece?
Yeah, it's pathetic.
I think my Prot Warrior is getting more from my 2-piece than Unholy.
I'm getting the same on my Red Paladin, man, for the 2-piece.
Oh,
the 4 pieces that it's at, so...
Alright. Just I want to say this, even though the tier set isn't, that powerful, it feels nice in some cases. Yeah. When you're playing a raid boss, you get into execute, there's a late bloodlust, mate, your DPS just pops.
Yes.
It's going to be, it's like, you're 7 for the meter, you get bloodlust, armor comes out, and you climb.
Oh, it feels so good.
You know how it is? Yeah, it's good.
But I think,
beautiful.
The credits where credit is due, and you guys can correct me because you play more Unholy than me, but I've played Unholy for some years now, and it's been, regardless of its performance, it's been pretty fun in Shadowlands. The changes to the talents, the way the rotation feels, in dungeons as well. I've played more in Mythic Plus than in raids, but it feels really nice to play. And it kind of sucks that sometimes the numbers are maybe not very indicative of how fun it is. And, we're always going to have that argument of, the most fun specs are the ones that usually underperform or things like that. But I mean, they're onto something with the current design of how mechanically the spec works. I think the only issue, like you guys said, is how it takes in the external powers. Because I was going to ask you that, and you already answered the question about how would Unholy feel. Let's say we're getting into 10.0. All of the stuff is disabled. We're not getting the new powers in. How is Unholy going to look? Because I remember at the beginning of 9.0, Unholy and I think Marksmanship were some of the best classes in the game before getting all of the stuff in. I know that we had a legendary or something, but that was about it, right?
Yep.
I think... sorry?
No, go ahead, Bicep. I've answered most of the
I was going to say that, Unholy currently is in a bit of a special spot because everything aligns to make it play nicely. We play a build which makes so we can pop our cooldowns on a 45-second window. We have the conduits to reduce. We have the talents to reduce the CDR. So, generally it plays quite nicely. It plays like a spec who has 3 cooldowns on a 45-second window, has a big cooldown every 3-4 minutes, and that's how you play it. However, you could just as well have picked up another set of talents which would have made it play awfully when nothing had aligned, and you would just press your cooldowns whenever they come up without, combining them. And if you remove all the borrowed power, that's kind of how Unholy will play.
Yeah, we got very lucky.
Yeah. Yes. It's very good that the best build that deals the most damage also feels the best to play by far.
Yes. We got very lucky in that regard. If Gargoyle was good, for example, Unholy players would be hating life right now. Because the opener alone becomes 25 seconds of pre-planned globals that you know you're going to be pressing every single time, just because you have to set up for Gargoyle, then you have to set up for your army, you have to set up all of your cooldowns so they all overlap together, and in between all that, you're trying to feed RP to Gargoyle. It's just a mess.
Yeah.
So people say they want Gargoyle, like, please no. And another thing, once we turn off all those bard powers, I know Bicep, I do too, but once we turn off all these bard powers going into 10.0, Unholy is going to feel a lot worse, because a lot of the bard powers we get are kind of adding into what makes Unholy feel smooth to play. Look at Deadliest Coil, for example, a 30 RP cost Death Coil. Losing that is going to feel like a major blow to Unholy's rotation. So we're going to go back to having 4 or 5 second periods of time where we just can't press any buttons because we're out of runic power, we're out of runes, or we're sitting at like 38 runic power, and it just feels terrible, because if you could just press it, you could get runic corruption, get runes back, and you continue your rotation. But you can't. It just feels terrible. And then Convocation of the Dead with its CDR right now, allowing Apocalypse to align with Light and Dark Transformation. That's going to be gone once we turn those off too. So Apocalypse is going to be on this weird 60-second cooldown, or 63-second, I guess it'll be, cooldown. So it's not going to align with anything, and it's not going to be worth holding for the next set either. It's just, when we turn all of this off, it's going to feel really strange for Unholy. I really hope that they baseline some of these things. Especially
they're going to change things, right? So, they're not going to move into the next expansion with just removing all the borrow power, and that's it. So I have faith that they understand what it would play like. And if they don't change it, obviously, we provide a feedback saying that, this is not very nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
They change it based on that.
Yeah,
that's the plan.
The things I want to see carried over into the next expansion, at the very least, is going to be that 30 runic power Death Coil. That's going to be a major thing. Unless they make our, runic power generation just absurd for some reason, then it'll probably be fine at 40. But I don't know what they're going to do. I just hope that stays. And then
I wouldn't mind if they removed the CDR effects also.
I was about to get to that. Please just give us set cooldowns. You know how much I rack my brain trying to figure out how to align cooldowns, Blizzard? Just please make Army a 3-minute cooldown and Apocalypse a 45-second cooldown. Don't give it to us in borrowed powers, please.
But it is true that in previous expansions they used their external powers to bake in to fix spec issues, more or less. You can see it from Legion to BFA, from BFA to Shadowlands. It could be the case. An interesting point you guys made, I wasn't aware of this, that, stripping down an Unholy Decay of everything that's, borrowed power, when compared to the others, it's kind of great, right? Now, we kind of know more or less that, the next expansion won't be as heavy with borrowed power systems. So if we would take the changes you guys mentioned, from the Death Coil thing, the CDR or whatever, and being baked into the spec, and then maybe all we get into the first tier and second will be classically tier sets. Would you guys feel this would bring back, I won't say the check, this is really fun spec, but the spotlight on Unholy DK. So just having one borrowed power, traditionally a tier set for the next expansion, and maintaining the, let's say, base kit as it is with a couple of changes that are, let's say, make it feel more smooth. Because we still have dead talents, right? You talked about Gargoyle. You always make the case about Gargoyle. It's like you guys, you think you want it, but you don't.
Yes.
I mean, would it shed the spotlight once again on the spec? And if so, how would they address the other issues? Okay, because this is a recurring theme every time in the podcast. They still have to look at some of these talents. They still have to do something about some of these talents that are never played. Because again, really trappy for new players. If you go the wrong build, you're gonna be very, very sad, and you're not gonna have fun. So, is this okay? Could we maybe have some flexibility there, or should we just, okay, this is the talent build, go for it, all expansion, see you in 2 years?
I'm a big fan of, situational talent choice. Where you pick up, you choose your talent based on situation instead of you picking into one build and then run that always. When it comes to, putting Unholy in the spotlight, it's all about, spinning the wheel to see if we end up powerful. I generally feel like, as I said previously, people overcomplicate things, and if you end up being a bit overtuned, then people play you, and you see yourself represented in the world race to world first, and there's lots of buzz and lots of people coming in. We saw that happen in Taez and Acherus, right? There's nothing majorly different with Unholy now compared to Taez and Acherus. It's just that it fit really nicely into the boss fights, and we didn't have much borrow power yet, so everyone else hadn't really popped off and, gained the lead versus Unholy. I'm generally, I'm very excited for 10.0 because it's always fun with new stuff, trying to figure out new builds. I'm happy with Unholy plays now. I think it could be more fun in Mythic Plus, but that's another thing. And I think, it's probably going to be lots of fun next expansion. I'm going to play it and I'm going to enjoy it. I have a positive outlook, but I always have that, so,
Yeah, you're a little bit too positive sometimes.
We talked about it, man. We need to have an intervention.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Taez?
My thoughts on this is Unholy, if they want to make the talent tree more diverse and they want to make it more fun for the average player or the average Joe to be able to just pick whatever they want and roll with it, they really need to lean more into Unholy's niches. Right now, we have a talent tree that focuses on diseases. We have a talent tree that focuses on pets. We have a talent tree that focuses on wounds. And if you look at the tree, you can see those very distinct paths that you can take down the tree. If somebody wants to play a Festering Wound build, they can totally play a Festering Wound build, but it's super undertuned. So I think in order to make Unholy's talent tree shine really well, they need to remove one of those options and then balance it out. The option I want to see removed is Festering Wounds. Just delete that from Unholy, please, for the love of God. They're just old rogue combo points that were per target. They're not fun. Please, just delete them. Rework the talent tree to be, you have a path that's focusing mostly on diseases, have a path that's focusing mostly on pets, and then have a couple, situational ones like, say, make Gargoyle a single target, final row talent choice for the pet build, and then have another, talent choice in that row that's another pet that does AoE damage, for example. You could make, a Magus of the Dead that does AoE. Just put it right there in the talent tree. It's totally possible. But I think that's what they need to do in order to make Unholy's talent tree more diverse, because trying to focus on 3 different things, they're failing at all 3 of them most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit skeptic when it comes to major changes. They were kind of lazy to do that with all the specs. They take 1 or 2 or 3 specs per expansion, at least in the last track record, and they do the major overhaul or whatever. And especially when talking about, removing talent stays, that sounds, now in the current days, it sounds very, very big for them to take. I know it's not hard, but in the perception of how they do things and how they change things, it feels. But on the other hand, I kind of vibe with Bicep's attitude here, because at the end of the day, we do live in a world right now where everybody just looks at Race to Worlds first, just constantly looks at blogs and make a decision based on that, what to play. They kind of exclude the fun component out of it, because fun for a lot of people means top DPS. Let's be real. It kind of always was like that, but and then the last, I would say, 3 expansion, it kind of degenerated into this. So I think if you have a spec like Unholy, which, okay, if you look at logs right now, cheeses or not, you won't see it like, oh my god, this is like super meta or whatever. But then again, you have folks like Biceps here, who plays the spec for longest time, does really well on it, and he tells you, listen man, this is really fun to play, and you haven't even broken the potential of the spec yet. Just wait a minute, and you'll see you'll do good. And generally, we kind of talk to, like, I would say, the average player here, where you don't have competitive mythic race to world first boys in the group, or if you have 1 or 2. But if you love your spec and you play it good, it will be fun, and you will deliver well. This is the thing. And we had the pleasure to play with Biceps a couple of times in Shadowlands actually, and we haven't we didn't have Unholy being meta, and he was like, shitting on us, no problemo.
Yeah, that's why I play tank now. No competition whatsoever. I cannot compete with an Unholy now.
Exactly. So it's definitely a thing of perspective, how you look at the spec. Yeah, sure. Technically, numbers-wise, it's not at its best, and it has strong competition. Come on, let's be real. Frost is insane right now. It wasn't always the case. This is another thing. It's one thing to compete with warriors and rogues or whatever, but when you compete within your class,
dude. Credit where credit is due, man. Frost kind of needed a little bit of love.
I know. I'm not trashing Frost
for some time. And we do have a tendency to talk a lot about the mechanical parts of things, the mathematical parts of things during specs. But there's one thing that I feel like, at least for Unholy, needs to be discussed a little bit more, and that is the aspect of fun, which can be translated into the theme, because potentially Unholy is maybe one of the most rich spec when it comes to themes, because Blizzard, the devs have killed a couple of thematical specs to make Unholy. We don't have necromancers because we have Unholy. We don't have diseases specs because we have Unholy, like witch doctor type specs because we have Unholy, because those diseases were from other classes as well. And obviously we have the DK theme, the Death Knight theme as well through Unholy, the resurrection, the zombies, all of that stuff, all of it is in Unholy. And like you said, Taez, I think maybe something that we can make, hopefully, people and eventually the devs more aware of, is that this theme is kind of really cool to play with. Like you said, you had a section of the talent trees with diseases, one with pets. There's also the theme of, the soul ripping part, which is kind of affliction-y, warlocky with soul reaper and stuff like that, which also fits into Unholy. So it's very rich, and I feel like they could definitely use those to create themed builds. You could say, I don't know, pets is the single target version of the build, the wounds is the AoE, but it does kind of feel like the potential of this being attained is kind of held back by the talent structure. I'm not sure if we can live in a world where pick one of three is ever going to create this type of play style. We can look at all the other specs, because you have rows of, this is the utility row, and then you have, for some specs, this is the AoE row, and you're always going to pick the bigger number, or this is a row where you have AoE, single target, and something else, and that's maybe when you pick something, but then it becomes unbalanced. For instance, the Warlocks always pick the AoE option where the Cataclysm is, even for single target. So it's a weird world where I think maybe the talent system is drawing them back, and I know that certain specs, I think we talked with Word Up, where Enhancement has like a sheet that's like, this is how you fix the spec with all the talents and spells and all of that. Do you guys have anything like this, or what would you see Unholy be like in terms of fun? Numbers, push numbers aside, in terms of fun, like how would you see Unholy be designed as fun? Do we need like an overhaul for the talents, or just play more on what already exists?
They're really close right now, honestly.
Yeah. I like Unholy. One thing I want is for Skirt Strike to be on the cap indefinitely K. And if they fix that, I would be very happy, because that makes it so that we are beast in AoE burst. And it enables a build which is played and can be played now, just doesn't feel as good as it could do if you uncap Skirt Strike indefinitely K. So if you're not aware, it's built on the Infected Claws Bursting Swords build. So Infected Claws applies lots of festering wounds in AoE. Bursting Swords means that when we burst those, they deal AoE damage. So the idea is to build up tons of wounds on all the targets, pop down Deafening K, burst them all, and deal millions of damage. That's the whole idea. And that just, falls a bit short, because you set up all these wounds, you pop down your Deafening K, and you can only pop 5 at a time, because that's the cap on Skirt Strike when you're sending your Deafening K. And it's a bit unfortunate, because you have lots of targets, lots of wounds, you can't really pop them all. You can't have this, the first Skirt Strike just depleting a pack like it did in BFA. And that's the only unfun part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I definitely agree there. I would like to see some of these, super bad talents in the tree be buffed up to be competitive as well. If we look at Pestilence, for example, that would fall directly into that Festering Wound build. If they were to change that talent to generate wounds while Death and Decay is active just all the time, it would make the Bursting Swords build just way more fun. Stuff like that. Those little changes. Like I said, when Bicep started out, they're really close right now. And for example, if they wanted to make the disease build viable, all they have to do is, drop, say, Gargoyle or Unholy Assault out of the talent tree, add back in Necrotic Plague, and then that disease build is alive and well again. Like, they're really, really close. They just have to actually commit to it and do it. And if they do, Unholy could be incredible. Like, could be incredibly versatile, could be incredibly fun, and have a flavor for everybody who likes Unholy. It's just, I don't know why they haven't done it yet. They're so close.
Yeah, I know. When it comes to the point of, having talent choice, because that generally doesn't happen, I do think, to be fair, it is difficult to create, 36 talent trees where each talent row has situational choice. Like, most often, if you have an AoE row, it's tricky to create 3 types of AoE, which can be picked in different scenarios. Usually, one of them is just best, and that's it. So I think it's a tricky one. Obviously, it's not impossible, and I would love to see them just tune the talents more often. We have too many instances where there's a talent who sits on the tune for the entire tiered expansion, but it could just, tune it up a little bit this month, a little bit more next month. Was that enough? No, let's do a bit more.
Or if we look
iterative.
Or for example, Harbinger of Doom, that's been in our talent tree forever. Like the last 2 expansions, it's just been a dead talent the entire time.
Oh yeah, I think it's playing PvP though, so that's also something to consider.
Only because you can't use Soul Reaper in PvP. Well, I mean, I'm
just saying that sometimes we are a bit, we snowed in on our PvE perspective. I mean, these sounds are not bad. And you look at these with the weirdos that play PvP and they use them, and you're like, okay.
I would
find some use.
I would agree with you if Sledge Belcher wouldn't be a PvP talent.
Yeah, I guess that's a point. But Bicep, I do want to point out that even though they use it in PvP, does not make it good. It's only because nothing else in that road does literally anything for them. It's the only one that even adds anything, and it's like 0.01% damage. So anyway, more frequent talent tuning would be absolutely wonderful, like Bicep said. That would keep things more diverse, keep things more fun and engaging for people. And they could explore some really cool build options. If we look at the last time they were doing frequent talent tuning back in Legion, like if we look at the start of Legion to the end of Legion, the builds we played were so vastly different, specifically for Unholy. We started off focusing on a Festering Wound build with Instructor's first lesson, I believe it was. And then we eventually moved on to the pet-centric build in Tomb with Arbiter. And that only happened because they were tuning the way our talents worked. They were tuning the way our abilities worked in order to really suit the playstyle more. And due to that, it created one of the most fun playstyles Unholy has ever had. Like, people loved Arbiter. And if they just started doing that again, it could be really fun.
All right, cool. Just to have it a conclusion onto what we talked so far. So Unholy right now is still in this very thin line of let's acquire. Let's get to the point where we get 4-piece and double Legos. And let's see how we're gonna roll from there. Currently in the meta, it's not like the worst performance spec. It's not like the best performance spec, but definitely worth having in your group, no doubt. Obviously, there's a lot of changes that could be done. Although at the beginning of the podcast, Bicep said that some tuning may occur. Although I think we're gonna have to wait for the race to end. I don't know if they're gonna do anything like super. At least the DPS, I know they did the hotfix for Blood Decay, which really pumped them up. But I'm not expecting too much. At least after the race to world first ends. That's the thing. And fair conclusion for at least the performance of Unholy, I guess it just got the short end of the stick when it comes to the borrowed power. The tier set, although it's not super terrible, it's not that great either. It's kind of okay, definitely in terms of gains worse than other specs. So this is the main issue. The spec in and of itself isn't that problematic necessarily. It just got unlucky with the borrowed power, which I would say it does indicate that at least for the future we could look at some better days, dare I say. There's other specs. So this is the thing, right? When you look at specs that rely so heavily on borrowed power, that becomes a major issue when you transition to a new season, a new expansion, blah 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 blah. if Unholy doesn't have this big reliance and it's doing like middle of the pack kind of numbers there, I think it's very promising. So looking at 10.0, are you guys? I know Biceps is very excited because he's generally excited about life, but Taez seems to always have this sort of like grounding, pull me back in. And I really want to get Taez's opinion on this because I don't think I've heard it. So Taez, if you're looking like realistically looking at 10.0, we don't know shit. But what are your expectations for Unholy in 10.0? Like super real, like based on ground. What do you expect for the spec?
With all the changes that are being made at Blizzard internally right now, with all the new designers they're hiring on, all the new talent they're bringing in, I think there's some potential for some really cool stuff to happen.
Ooh.
I don't know what it's going to be yet, but honestly, with if we're looking at like some of the newer hires, Scarizard, for example, absolutely wonderful guy, talks to the community,
MVP.
Has some brilliant ideas. He's the one who designed our tier sets. Like, I love the guy's designs. If, for example, somebody like him comes up and takes over Death Knight class design, for example, we could see some really cool, some really innovative stuff that we have never seen before. So I am hopeful too, but I do want to say, with how far behind Shadowlands fell, like, let's be real, they were behind on their patch cycle pretty heavily. I don't know if they're going to have the design time to make 10.0 as great as it could be, but I don't know. They could. And if they do, I'm going to be really excited to see it.
Yep. Maybe not necessarily at the beginning of 10.0, but somewhere in the 0.1 patch, maybe gathering up some ideas and implementing them. This is a good point.
Definitely.
You mentioned something really cool, and I think this could hold ground for future expansion still. Having a spec, Unholy in this case, playing multiple builds and iterations on the course of an expansion, like Legion. That for me, that sounds pretty cool because you always feel, it's a fresh start in a way for each new season to have, okay, now this build is viable, now we can do this build, you can do this build, and so on and so forth. And it does implement, some sort of, let's say, iterative process because it does involve, tuning talents, abilities, or some external power if you want. But overall, things are looking good. I was trying to get this community perception to Unholy is shit. No, it's not shit. At the end of the day, no spec is that shit. Is there?
I mean, when you if we're gonna be talking about community perception, and you look at, I don't know, people playing meta specs like mages and boonkins and saying that Unholy shit is like, okay, I'm yet to see you guys do like 11k, 12k, 13k single target. So I don't know why we're talking about this meta, this being good or bad when people cannot play their spec to the utmost because it takes a while. There's a learning curve, and once you have that done, you're pretty much going to perform better than, I don't know, the majority of the players anyway. So before we get to that point, how about mastering the spec first and seeing exactly what it is about? And at the end of the day, Unholy is, I believe, a pretty cool group. I know that Bicep mentioned that it doesn't bring a lot into Mythic Plus. In the grand scheme of things, I always appreciate an AMZ every now and again. And, breaking out of fears, breaking out of stuns, Unholy is a pretty cool spec.
Yeah, grabby hands and all of that. So
We're not supposed to talk about.
No, we're not talking about that. No, I'm sorry. No, but just in the wise words of Bicepspump, just have fun, goddammit. It's fun. Just enjoy it. You'll do well. Don't look at logs. Just if you want to improve yourself.
In the pessimistic words of Taez, look at Frost.
Okay, fair point.
Well, there's always a backup.
Fair point. Well, I'm looking at logs right now, and it's it definitely looks better in Mythic Plus. But holy shit, look at Blood Decay in Mythic Plus. Okay, never mind. It's not healthy to look at it right now. Okay, we'll have to see.
Unholy's going to slap in Mythic Plus still. Just when it's
really
competing with Frost, it's not going to look as good. But if you want to play Unholy in Mythic Plus, it's going to be really good. I don't want you guys to give that wrong idea, though.
Yeah. No, it's
It's a shame that the tier set really doesn't do much in Mythic Plus. Like it has close to zero value, if we're going to be honest.
True.
And that's obviously going to be difficult when you compete with Frost DK, so have a tier set which is pretty damn powerful in Mythic Plus. It's very, very good. So it's very biased, right?
Exactly.
I'm gonna try. I promise I will try out to play some Frosted Mythic Plus as well.
I mean, it's there. Might as well, give it a go.
Yeah. I even swapped my loot spec to Frost.
Hello.
Oh, changes are coming.
This is the first sign of the apocalypse, man. It's like Biceps.
I'll give you guys a preview of next time. Hey, Bicep, when are you trying the Gavel two-handed plus or two-handed Oblit in Mythic Plus? You gonna go Fae? You gonna do it?
Ooh,
Oh yeah,
spicy.
it's fun.
Do it.
It's good. Yeah. And then stream it too. And by the way, speaking of streaming, be sure, guys, to check the link in the description. In case you're listening to this on Spotify or whatever, go to YouTube on youtube.com/Mocast and check the description so you can get the links for the Bicepspump YouTube and Twitch and all of that. I don't know if Taez has anything over there. I think I've asked it a couple of times. If he's gonna have something, it's gonna be there. But definitely good sources of both information and entertainment, I would say. But especially like if you look or read Bicepspump's Unholy guides, you're gonna learn a lot about the spec. And I've looked at the guide. Jesus Christ, it's a lot of information there. Holy fuck.
It's Shadowlands for you.
Yeah, I mean the man put in some work, so has to be praised for it. Do we want to? Yeah, man. Do you want to address anything else? Because my time is getting...
Yeah, I guess this is as good as a point as any. I would expect more things to happen with Unholy 9.2, and if it does, and if it's like really juicy, we can get back into it and talk about how the state of Unholy is, maybe in a couple of months as well. And I know that we're gonna be chatting about Frost Decay soon. So thank you very much, guys, for coming in today on kind of a short notice to really chat about Unholy.
I want to stress this out. These boys, whenever we want to do an Unholy or DK podcast in general, these boys are the first to go. Name the time. It's like, huge respect and love for you for the both
Appreciate
of you.
it.
Always being down to doing this. So yeah. If anything happens, definitely we'll have another podcast with the boys dissecting and discussing. Really, really,
Nice.
really awesome.
Thank you very much, guys, and
thank you for watching or listening. Hope you got something out of this. I know I always get something out of these Unholy DK podcasts because I'm
you're
almost
getting that one step closer.
Yeah,
to playing
closer because I have my Unholy DK. The last time we did the podcast, I made my Unholy DK, started leveling his ass. Then we started.
Now you're
doing
gonna
the
farm
roles
rep instead of Mortis.
It's all good. It's all good. But yeah, thank you guys for watching and listening. We shall see you on the next Monday, probably with Breaking WoW. If not, some other juicy topic to discuss or class. Well, we'll have to see. Until next time, bye.
See ya.
Thank you.
Toodaloo. Wololo.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classical retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.